The small diplomatic ship drifted through space like a leaf in the wind. Inside, Jindae sat quietly in his seat, his old hands folded in his lap. At 78 years old, he had seen many things in his life. Wars, peace, the first time humans met aliens, and now this failed mission. The peace talks had gone nowhere. The Vraxian Empire refused to listen. Beside him sat 3 younger crew members. Hana was a scientist who studied alien life. She was only 26 and still believed diplomacy could work. Changwu was their security officer, always alert and watching. Yuna worked with communications, her fingers constantly moving over her equipment even now. "They're not going to let this go," Changwu said, staring at his scanner. His face was tense. Jindae nodded slowly. He had expected this. The Vraxians were proud, too proud. They saw humans as children playing at being adults in a galaxy full of ancient empires. Suddenly, red lights flashed across the ship. Alarms screamed. Yuna's hands flew across her console. 3 Vraxian warships just appeared. "They're surrounding us." The communication screen flickered to life. A Vraxian officer appeared, his scales gleaming under the harsh lights of his bridge. His eyes were cold and filled with contempt. "Human vessel, you will power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." Changwu looked at Jindae. The old admiral shook his head. "Power down. We cannot fight 3 warships." The boarding happened fast. Vraxian soldiers stormed through their ship, weapons raised. They were tall creatures covered in dark scales, with 4 arms and eyes that could see in many light spectrums. They grabbed the humans roughly, binding their hands with energy cuffs that burned slightly against the skin. They were dragged to the Vraxian flagship, a massive vessel called the Crimson Talon. The ship was enormous, easily 50 times the size of their small diplomatic craft. Inside, everything was designed for beings much larger than humans. The corridors stretched high above them, making Jindae and his crew feel like insects. They were thrown into a large chamber. Hundreds of aliens stood watching. Some Jindae recognized from the Galactic Council meetings. Others were species he had never seen before. All of them stared at the humans with curiosity or amusement. A tall figure walked forward. Empress Velshara herself had come to see the captured humans. She was the ruler of 10,000 worlds, a being of immense power. Her scales were deep crimson, and she wore armor that seemed to be made of living metal. Her presence filled the room. "So these are the humans," she said, her voice booming through translators. "The species that dares to demand a seat at the council. Look at them, small, weak, pitiful." Laughter rippled through the crowd of aliens. Some of them pointed at the humans, making jokes in languages the translators struggled to convert. Velshara walked closer to Jindae. She looked down at him, her height nearly twice his. "And this one, this old creature, are you their leader?" "I am Admiral Jindae, retired." "I serve as a cultural ambassador for Earth," he replied calmly. More laughter. "An admiral," Velshara mocked. "Tell me, old human, how many ships does your navy have? 100? 200? Jindae said nothing. His face remained calm, showing no emotion. "We have searched your databases," Velshara continued. "Your species controls 47 worlds. You have 12 billion souls. You have been traveling the stars for barely 300 years. And yet you come to us demanding equality?" She leaned closer. "You are insects pretending to be dragons." The Vraxian guards forced Jindae to stand at attention. They made him stand there for hours while aliens came and went, taking pictures, making jokes. Some threw food at the humans. Others simply stared like they were animals in a zoo. Hana's legs shook with exhaustion. Changwu's jaw was clenched so tight his teeth hurt. Yuna kept her eyes down, fighting back tears of humiliation. But Jindae stood straight, his old body refusing to bend. The broadcast went out across the entire galaxy. Billions of beings on thousands of worlds watched the humans being mocked. The galactic internet filled with memes and jokes. "Humanity thinks it matters," one popular post said. Next, their goldfish will want council seats too. After 12 hours of standing, Jindae's legs finally began to shake. A Vraxian guard laughed and pushed him. "Look, the old one is going to fall." But Jindae caught himself. He straightened up again, his eyes focusing on something far away. Something the Vraxians could not see. Empress Velshara returned. She had been watching the galactic feeds, enjoying the mockery spreading across the networks. She stood before Jindae again. "Your government has been silent. No threats. No demands for your release. It seems even they know you are not worth saving." Behind her, screen showed Earth, the blue planet spinning peacefully in space.
That is your world, yes?
So small, so defenseless. Perhaps we should make an example of it. Show the galaxy what happens to species that reach beyond their grasp. The other aliens murmured in agreement. This would teach the younger species their place. The old empires would remind everyone who truly ruled the galaxy. Jindai finally spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "You should not do that," Velshara laughed. It was a harsh, cruel sound. "Oh, and why not, old human? What could your primitive species possibly do to the Vraxian Empire? We have ships that could turn your planet to ash. We have armies that have conquered galaxies. What do you have?" Jindai lifted his head. For the first time since his capture, he looked directly into Velshara's eyes. The room grew quiet. Something in the old man's gaze made even the Empress pause. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber. Every translator caught his words. Every camera recorded them. Every being in the galaxy would hear what he said next. "You want war? We will give you war." The words hung in the air like a physical thing, the simplicity of them, the certainty, the absolute lack of fear or doubt in his voice. It was not a threat. It was not a boast. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the weight of absolute truth. Velshara stared at him. For just a moment she saw something in those old human eyes that made her scales prickle with unease. Then she laughed again, though it sounded forced. "Cut the transmission. Throw them in the detention cells." As the guards dragged them away, Jindai looked back at the Empress one last time. He did not look afraid. He did not look defeated. He looked sad, like a man who had just witnessed someone make a terrible mistake. The transmission had already spread across the galaxy. The video of the old human, standing after hours of torment, delivering his quiet promise of war. Most species found it hilarious. A few found it touching in a pathetic way. None of them took it seriously. That was their first mistake. The video spread like wildfire across the galactic network. Within hours, every species had seen it. An old human, barely able to stand after hours of torment, looking at the most powerful empress in the galaxy and promising war. The reactions were exactly what Velshara had hoped for. Laughter. Endless laughter. Memes flooded the networks. Comedians made jokes. News programs showed the clip while analysts explained how impossible it would be for humanity to threaten the Vraxian Empire. The math was simple and brutal. The Vraxians had 10,000 worlds. Humanity had 47. The Vraxians had trillions of citizens. Humanity had billions. The Vraxians had conquered half the galaxy over thousands of years. Humanity had barely left their own solar system 3 centuries ago. A popular game show host summed it up perfectly. "That's like a mouse threatening a dragon." No, wait, that's insulting to mice. At least mice are quick. On Earth, things were very different. President Taeyang sat in the emergency council room deep beneath the Capitol. The room was filled with holographic displays showing everything. The captured crew, the Vraxian fleet movements, the galactic reactions, the intelligence reports. His face was carved from stone, showing nothing. Around the table sat the most powerful people in human space. Defense Minister Hosiok was already pulling up military readiness reports. Intelligence Director Sora had files spread before her, each marked with the highest security classifications. Chief Diplomat Minho looked tired. His efforts at peace now turned to ash. "They're mobilizing," Hosiok said, pointing to the display. 3,000 Vraxian warships are gathering near their border with our space. They're calling it the Punishment Fleet. They plan to destroy our orbital defenses around Earth as a demonstration. After that, they'll demand our complete surrender. Minho shook his head. "We could still negotiate. Apologize for Jindai's words. Claim he was suffering from stress and no." The word came from Sora. She stood and activated her display. "We've been preparing for this scenario for 200 years. Ever since first contact, ever since we realized how dangerous this galaxy really is, we've been building. Waiting. Hoping we'd never need it. But if there was ever a time, this is it." She pulled up classified files that made even the president's eyes widen. Project Moon Garden. The Saturn Initiative. Operation Deep Sleep. The Outer Watch. Names that only a handful of people in all of human space knew about. Jindai knew, Sora continued. He's one of the few who does. When he said those words, he wasn't making a threat. He was warning them. Giving them a chance to back down before we reveal everything. Taeyang looked at each council member. You understand what this means? If we fight, there's no going back. Even if we win, we'll lose millions, maybe billions. If we lose, humanity ends. They won't just conquer us. After this humiliation, they'll erase us. Then we make sure we don't lose, Hoseok said quietly. The vote was called. One by one, each council member cast their decision. When it was done, the result was unanimous. War Taeyang stood and walked to the window that looked out over the city. Billions of people going about their lives having no idea what was coming. May history forgive us, he whispered. Then louder, issue Protocol Omega, wake everyone up. Across human space, things began to move. On the moon, construction crews that had been working on mining operations for decades suddenly stopped pretending. The entire surface began to shift. Massive doors opened that had been hidden in plain sight for 70 years. Inside, where there should have been rock and dust, there was something else entirely. Shipyards. Massive, secret shipyards that had been building warships in the one place no one would think to look. Earth's own moon. Mars Command activated satellites that had been disguised as weather monitoring stations. They weren't weather stations. They were weapon platforms, each carrying rail guns that could punch through starship armor like paper. On Titan, General Jin Woo gave orders to his crew. They had lived their entire lives on this frozen moon, telling their families they were working on terraforming projects. They weren't. They had been building and training with drone fighters that could be controlled by AI, allowing for maneuvers that would kill organic pilots. In the asteroid belt, miners who weren't really miners powered up stations that weren't really mining stations. They were weapons platforms hidden among the rocks, waiting for this exact moment. But the biggest secret was still out there, beyond the edge of known space. The colony ships that had launched over the past century had been called humanity's hope for the future. Thousands of volunteers had boarded those ships, knowing they would spend their entire lives in space traveling to distant stars. Their children would see new worlds. They were heroes, pioneers, the best humanity had to offer. That was the story everyone believed. The truth was different. Those weren't colony ships. They were mobile fortresses, battle stations that could move, fight, and sustain themselves for decades. Every colonist was actually a soldier, an engineer, a warrior who had volunteered for a mission they might never complete. They had spent years, decades, training and waiting in the dark between stars. Now they received the signal. Finally. After all this time. They turned their massive ships around and began the journey home. They would arrive too late for the first battles, but when they did arrive, they would bring a force that would shock the galaxy. Meanwhile, aboard the Crimson Talon, Jin Dae and his crew sat in their cell. It was a small room with hard benches and a single dim light. Hana was using her knowledge of alien biology to study their guards through the small window. Chang Wu paced, his mind working through escape plans. Yuna had managed to salvage some components from her equipment before they were taken, and she was quietly assembling something in the corner. Jin Dae sat still, his eyes closed, breathing slowly. He looked like he was sleeping, but he was actually meditating, a practice he had learned decades ago during his time in the military. A guard approached their cell. It wasn't a Vraxian. It was a Quellan, a smaller species that often served in Vraxian ships. This one was named Tixra, and unlike his masters, he seemed uncomfortable with what was happening. "Why are you not afraid?" Tixra asked Jin Dae through the bars. "The Empress will make an example of your world. Your people will die. Why do you sit there so calmly?" Jin Dae opened his eyes and looked at the guard. "I'm not afraid of dying," he said softly. "I'm old. I've lived a good life. I'm afraid of what comes next." "What comes next?" Tixra asked, confused. "The war," Jin Dae replied. "I'm not afraid for myself. I'm afraid for them. For the Vraxians. For everyone who thinks this will be easy." He looked directly at the Quellan. "When this is over, the galaxy will be different, and not in the way the Empress thinks." Tixra backed away, disturbed by something in the old human's voice. That certainty again. That strange, sad certainty. Above them, the Vraxian punishment fleet prepared to depart. 3,000 of the Empire's finest warships ready to crush humanity and teach the galaxy a lesson about respecting their betters. They launched toward human space, confident and proud. Behind them, the entire Vraxian Empire celebrated. This would be over in days, maybe hours. A quick, brutal lesson. They had no idea what was waiting for them in the dark. The Vraxian punishment fleet moved through space like a swarm of angry hornets. 3,000 warships, each one capable of destroying a city from orbit. They traveled in perfect formation, a display of military precision that the Empire had perfected over thousands of years. On the flagship, Admiral Krelthas watched the displays with satisfaction. They would reach the human colony of New Sol in 2 days. After destroying it, they would move on to Earth itself. The humans would surrender before a single shot was fired at their homeworld. They always did. Across the galaxy, other species watched with interest. The major networks covered it like a sporting event. Betting pools opened on how long humanity would last. Most bets were measured in hours, not days. On Earth, Admiral Yuna G stood on the bridge of the battleship Indomitable. She was 42 years old and had spent her entire career preparing for a war she hoped would never come. Around her, the crew worked in silence. There was no panic, no fear, just grim determination. Status? She asked her tactical officer. Moon Garden is fully operational. Mars platforms are online. Titan drones are deployed. Belt stations are ready. All personnel are at battle stations, Yuna nodded. And the message? Sent to all human ships and stations. They know what to do. The message was simple. 3 words that humanity had drilled for centuries. Protocol Thermopylae active. It was named after an ancient battle on Earth where a small force held back an empire. Now humanity would do the same. They would not win by matching the Vraxians ship for ship. They would win by making every meter of space cost more than the Vraxians were willing to pay. The Vraxian fleet approached New Sol. The colony orbited a distant star, home to 3 million humans. It had been established 50 years ago and was considered one of humanity's success stories. Farms covered the surface. Cities gleamed under the sun. It looked peaceful, defenseless. Admiral Krelthas smiled. This would be even easier than he thought. All ships prepared to... The space around his fleet exploded with light. The asteroid belt near New Sol, which his sensors had scanned and found empty, suddenly wasn't empty anymore. Hundreds of platforms powered up, each one launching missiles and railgun rounds. They had been there all along, running silent, waiting. But they weren't platforms. They were asteroids that had been hollowed out and filled with weapons. They looked exactly like normal space rocks until they opened fire. At the same time, what the Vraxians had thought were cargo ships and mining vessels suddenly changed. Their hulls split open, revealing weapons. Civilians didn't run away. They attacked. The Vraxian vanguard of 200 ships found themselves in a killing field. Human weapons were different from what the Vraxians expected. They weren't energy weapons that could be blocked by shields. They were physical projectiles moving at incredible speeds. Railguns that shot metal slugs at a fraction of light speed. Missiles that could think for themselves and hunt their targets. The Vraxians returned fire, but the humans weren't where they thought they would be. Human ships moved in ways that seemed impossible, making turns that should have crushed their crews. It took the Vraxians several minutes to realize the truth. Many human combat ships had no crews at all. They were controlled by computers, allowing them to make maneuvers that would kill living beings. In 7 minutes, the Battle of New Sol was over. 197 Vraxian ships were destroyed or disabled. 3 escaped, limping back to the main fleet with horrifying reports. Admiral Krelthas stared at his screens in disbelief. That was impossible. Humans were primitives. They were weak. They were supposed to surrender, not fight back with weapons that could tear through Vraxian armor. He sent a message back to the Empress. He requested reinforcements. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. The memes stopped. The jokes died. Species that had been laughing just hours ago now watched with growing unease. What else were the humans hiding? On Earth's moon, massive doors opened wide. What had been hidden inside for 70 years now emerged into the light. 800 warships, each one built specifically for war, not exploration. They were different from normal human ships. More aggressive. More dangerous. They had been designed by people who studied every battle, every war, every conflict in galactic history and learned from all of them. Admiral Yuna G gave the order. Launch the first fleet. It's time to show them who we really are. The human warships spread out across their territory. They didn't form a defensive line. Instead, they scattered, making themselves hard to target, impossible to pin down. Each ship was a threat on its own. Together, they were a nightmare. Mars revealed its secrets next. What satellites the Vraxians had thought were for communications or weather started shooting. Railgun. Platforms that had been hidden in plain sight for decades opened fire. Any Vraxian ship that came within range of Mars found itself under attack from weapons that could punch through their hulls. On Titan, General Jin Woo launched his drone swarms. Thousands of small fighters, each one controlled by advanced AI, swarmed out from the hidden bases. They moved like schools of fish, coordinating with perfect precision. Each drone was small enough to avoid most weapons, but together they could overwhelm even the largest warships. Europa Base, hidden under the ice of Jupiter's moon, released something even stranger: submarines. But these weren't for water. They were designed for space combat, sleek and fast, able to hide in the asteroid fields and strike without warning. But the real shock came from beyond the outer rim. Ships began appearing on long-range sensors. Big ships, more than 1,000 of them. The colony ships, the ones that humanity had sent out over the past century, were returning. They weren't colony ships at all. Fleet Admiral Dai Chang commanded the defense from a hidden station inside Saturn's rings. He was 68 years old, a veteran of humanity's early space conflicts with pirates and raiders. He had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. His tactical display showed the Vraxian fleet spreading out, trying to attack multiple human colonies at once. It was a good strategy against a normal enemy. Against humans, it was a mistake. "They're dividing their forces," his tactical officer said. Dai Chang smiled coldly. "Good, let them. We'll take them apart piece by piece." He opened communication channels to all human forces. "All ships execute Protocol Thermopylae. Make them pay for every meter." The war exploded across human space. The Vraxians had numbers, but humans had prepared every centimeter of their territory to be a trap. Every colony was a fortress. Every asteroid could be hiding weapons. Every ship that looked civilian might be armed. Defense Minister Hoseok watched from Earth's command center. Reports flowed in from every battle. Humans were winning engagements they should lose. They were destroying Vraxian ships at ratios that seemed impossible. But people were dying too. New Busan Colony took heavy bombardment. Terra Nova had to evacuate. Olympus Station's commander chose to self-destruct rather than let the Vraxians capture it, taking 200 enemy ships with her. The galaxy watched in amazement. This wasn't supposed to happen. The humans were supposed to lose. They were outnumbered, outgunned, facing an empire that had crushed civilizations for millennia. Instead, the Vraxians were bleeding. For every human ship destroyed, they lost 3 or 4 of their own. Their admiral were confused, panicking, unable to understand how primitives could fight like this. What they didn't understand was simple. The Vraxians had spent centuries at peace, growing soft, fighting only weak enemies. Humans had spent centuries preparing for war, knowing they would be outnumbered, knowing they would have to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless than any enemy they faced. The humans weren't fighting to conquer. They were fighting to survive. And there is nothing in the universe more dangerous than someone fighting for their life. In 3 days, the Vraxian punishment fleet was reduced by half. The survivors retreated, regrouping, calling for more ships. They sent messages back to the Empress. This wasn't a punishment mission anymore. This was a real war. Empress Velshara watched the reports in growing fury and fear. She had mocked the old human. She had broadcast his humiliation across the galaxy. Now that same galaxy watched as humanity made a mockery of her empire. She gave the order: send everything. 50,000 warships, the full might of the Vraxian Empire. She would not just defeat humanity. She would erase them from existence. The galaxy held its breath. This would be the real test. Could humanity truly stand against one of the old empires when they brought their full power? Admiral Yuna Ji received the intelligence reports. 50,000 ships coming, against humanity's few thousand. The odds were worse than before. She looked at her crew. They looked back at her, steady and ready. She smiled. Well then, let's show them what it really means to fight humanity. The Vraxian Armada was the largest military force assembled in 500 years. 50,000 warships pulling crews and resources from across the empire. Empress Velshara commanded it personally from her flagship, the Eternal Dominion. She would not allow this humiliation to continue. The fleet divided into 3 massive groups. The core fleet, led by Velshara herself, would strike directly at Earth. The northern fleet would cut off human colonies from each other. The Southern Fleet would destroy supply lines and shipyards. It was a strategy that had worked 1,000 times before against 100 different species. On Earth, President Taeyang received the intelligence reports. His face remained calm, but inside his heart was heavy. 50,000 ships. Even with all their preparations, all their secret weapons, humanity had perhaps 5,000 ships total. The math was brutal and simple. Can we win? He asked Defense Minister Ho Seok. Ho Seok was quiet for a moment. No, not in a straight fight. But we don't need to win. We need to survive long enough that they decide the cost is too high. How many will we lose? Millions. Maybe billions before this is over. Taeyang looked out over the city again, all those lives depending on decisions made in this room. Then we make sure their sacrifice means something. Issue the order. Every colony fights. No surrender. No retreat. The order went out across human space. Some colonies received it with determination, others with fear. But all of them prepared. If they were going to die, they would die fighting. The Vraxian Northern Fleet hit first. 20,000 ships descended on the outer colonies. These were the newer settlements, less defended, more vulnerable. The Vraxians expected quick victories. They were wrong. New Busan was a farming colony, home to 2 million people. When the Vraxian fleet arrived, the colonists didn't evacuate. They armed themselves. Farmers became soldiers. Tractors became weapons platforms. The colony had been preparing for this day since it was founded. The battle for New Busan lasted 3 weeks. Every building was a fortress. Every street was a trap. The colonists used their knowledge of the land to ambush Vraxian ground forces. Orbital defenses, hidden in what looked like grain silos and water towers, shot down landing craft. When the end came, when the Vraxians finally used orbital bombardment to level the city, they had lost 300 ships and 40,000 soldiers. 2 million humans died, but they had made the Vraxians pay a price they would never forget. Terra Nova faced similar odds. Colonel Bora commanded the defense. She was a career officer, trained in tactics that emphasized mobility and surprise. When the Vraxians attacked with overwhelming force, she didn't try to hold ground. Instead, she scattered her forces, making the enemy chase ghosts. Vraxian ships found themselves ambushed from asteroids they had already cleared. Human fighters would attack, retreat into debris fields, then attack from a different angle. Bora's forces lost every major battle but won the war of attrition. For every human ship destroyed, 2 Vraxian vessels were crippled or destroyed. After 6 weeks, Bora received orders to fall back to Earth. Only 30% of her fleet remained, but she had destroyed or damaged 500 enemy ships. As her surviving forces retreated, she looked at the planet she was abandoning and whispered an apology to the civilians who couldn't escape. Olympus Station faced the worst fate. It was a massive shipyard in orbit around a gas giant, capable of building 20 warships at a time. The Vraxians wanted it intact. They offered the commander, Admiral Jiwoo, a choice: surrender and be treated well, or be destroyed. Jiwoo's response was broadcast across the galaxy. The day humanity surrenders its freedom is the day humanity deserves to die. We choose death with honor over life in chains. The station fought for 5 days against a fleet of 2,000 ships. When it was clear they could not win, Jiwoo activated the station's self-destruct sequence. The explosion was visible from 3 planets away. It destroyed the station, killed all 12,000 people aboard, and took 200 Vraxian ships with it. The galaxy watched these battles with growing horror. This wasn't war as they knew it. This was something darker, more primal. Humans fought with a desperation that terrified even hardened warriors. Aboard the Crimson Talon, Jindae and his remaining crew members watched through intercepted feeds. They had learned that Changwu had died in an escape attempt. The news hit them hard. Changwu had been their protector, their friend, but his death had not been in vain. Before the Vraxians killed him, he had managed to send a signal. Hana had discovered something important about Vraxian biology, a weakness in their neural systems. Changwu had used a hidden transmitter Yuna built to send that information back to human space. Now, as they watched their people dying, Hana worked feverishly on her data. If we can weaponize this, she told Yuna, we might give our people a chance. Jindae sat quietly, his old eyes fixed on the screens showing burning colonies. So many, he whispered. So many dead. Do you regret it? Yuna asked. Saying what you said? Starting this war? Jinde shook his head slowly. I didn't start this war. I tried to prevent it. But when prevention failed, when they chose to mock us, capture us, threaten to destroy our home, the war became inevitable. I only spoke the truth they refused to hear. The door to their cell opened. Vraxian guards entered, roughly pulling Jinde to his feet. The Empress wants to see you again, old human. She has something special planned. Jinde was dragged to the same chamber where he had been mocked before, but this time the mood was different. The aliens were not laughing. They were angry, frightened. The Vraxians had expected an easy victory. Instead, they were paying in blood for every world they took. Empress Velshara stood waiting. Her scales were darker now, flushed with rage. You, she hissed at Jinde. This is your fault. Your words started this. Millions dead. Billions more will die when we reach Earth. Jinde met her gaze steadily. I told you. You want war? We will give you war. You chose to ignore the warning. We will reach Earth in 6 days, Velshara said. 15,000 ships will destroy your orbital defenses. We will bombard your cities until nothing remains, and you will watch it happen. Perhaps, Jinde replied calmly. Or perhaps you still don't understand what you're facing. What I'm facing? Velshara laughed bitterly. I'm facing a species of stubborn fools who don't know when they're beaten. You've lost colonies. You've lost millions. You're outnumbered 10 to 1. What could you possibly do that would change anything? Jinde's expression was sad, almost pitying. You started this war to defeat us. We're fighting this war to survive. You're fighting for pride. We're fighting for our children's future. You think you can make us stop by making us suffer, but you still don't understand. The more you hurt us, the harder we fight, because we have nowhere to retreat to. This is our last stand. Every stand is our last stand. He paused, then added quietly, You could have had us as friends. Instead, you made us your nightmare. When this is over, win or lose, the galaxy will remember. They'll remember that the Vraxian Empire attacked a young species and that young species made you bleed. Velshara struck him. The blow sent the old man sprawling. Take him away. Put him somewhere he can watch when we destroy his world. As guards dragged Jinde back to his cell, Hana and Yuna helped him sit down. His face was bruised, but his eyes were still clear. Did you finish it? He asked Hana. The weapon? She nodded. The frequency that disrupts their neural systems. I've calculated it. We just need to transmit it to our forces. Changwu already did, Yuna said softly. Before he died, he sent everything. Our people have it now. Jinde closed his eyes. Then his death meant something. They all meant something. He looked at both women. When the fleet reaches Earth, that's when we'll see if humanity truly deserves to survive. Across human space, scientists received Hana's data. They began building weapons based on it. Not to kill, but to incapacitate. A frequency that would disable Vraxian nervous systems for several minutes. Long enough. As the Vraxian core fleet approached Earth, humanity prepared for the final battle. Every ship, every weapon, every person ready to fight. They had lost so much already. They would lose more before this ended, but they would not surrender. Never surrender. Because that's what it meant to be human. Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, beautiful and fragile. From orbit you could see the continents, the oceans, the white clouds drifting across the atmosphere. 13 billion people lived on that world, going about their daily lives, trying not to think about the fleet coming to destroy them. The Vraxian core fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. 15,000 warships, the largest assault force ever sent against a single world. They moved forward in perfect formation, confident and unstoppable. Empress Velshara stood on her flagship's bridge, watching Earth grow larger on the displays. That is their home, she said to her officers. That is where they came from, where they grew, where they think they're safe. Today we show them nowhere is safe from the Empire. On Earth, alarms screamed across every military installation. Admiral Yuna G stood on the Indomitable's bridge, watching the incoming fleet. Her tactical officer gave her the numbers. 15,000 against 2,000. The humans couldn't win. Mathematics said so. History said so. Logic said so. All ships, this is Admiral G, she broadcast to the human fleet. Today we fight not just for Earth, but for every human world, every human life, every human dream. They think we'll break. They think we'll run. Show them what humanity really means. Show them we'd rather die free than live as slaves. The human fleet moved to intercept. They didn't form a defensive line. Instead, they scattered, using tactics they had perfected over months of desperate fighting. Hit and run, ambush and retreat. Make every shot count. Make them pay for every meter. The battle began at maximum range. Vraxian energy weapons lanced out, their beams bright against the darkness of space. Human railguns answered, sending metal slugs at incredible speeds. Missiles streaked between the fleets, hunting their targets with artificial intelligence. The first hours were chaos. Ships exploded. Debris scattered. Human forces used the moon as cover, hiding behind its mass, forcing the Vraxians to divide their attention. Weapons platforms hidden in lunar craters opened fire, adding their firepower to the desperate defense. On Mars, the railgun satellites fired continuously. They couldn't stop the Vraxian fleet, but they could hurt it, make it bleed. Every Vraxian ship that came within range found itself under attack from weapons that could penetrate their shields. Admiral Dai Chang coordinated the defense from his hidden command station. His display showed the battle unfolding in real time. Humans were losing, but they were making the Vraxians pay. 3 human ships destroyed for every one they took down. Bad odds, but better than 15 to 1. "Sir, the colony ships are arriving," his tactical officer reported. Dai Chang smiled grimly. "About time. Deploy them along Vector 7. Hit the Vraxian southern flank." The colony ships, those massive mobile fortresses that had spent decades traveling the stars, entered the battle. Each one was a battleship in its own right, armed with weapons that had been designed and refined over 100 years. They struck the Vraxian fleet from an unexpected angle, causing confusion and forcing ships to redirect. But the Vraxians had numbers. For every ship humanity destroyed, 2 more took its place. Slowly, inevitably, the human fleet was being pushed back toward Earth itself. On the second day of battle, the Vraxians began orbital bombardment. Energy beams lanced down toward the cities. Point defense systems shot down most of them, but not all. Buildings fell. People died. The planet itself became a battlefield. President Taeyang stood in a bunker deep beneath the capital, watching the destruction through cameras. His city, his world burning under alien attack. He picked up the communicator. "Admiral G, status?" "We're holding barely. But we can't hold forever. We need the weapon to work, sir. If Hana's discovery doesn't work, we're finished." The weapon was humanity's last hope. Scientists had taken Hana's research on Vraxian neural weakness and built transmitters into every human ship. They would broadcast a specific frequency that should disrupt Vraxian nervous systems. It wouldn't kill them, just incapacitate them temporarily. But in battle, a few minutes of helplessness meant death. The problem was testing it. They only had one chance. If it didn't work, they would have wasted precious time and resources. But if it did work, it might turn the tide. On the 3rd day, Admiral Yunaji made the decision. "All ships activate neural disruptors on my mark. This is everything. If this doesn't work, we fight to the last ship anyway. If it does work, we push them back hard and fast. Mark." Across the human fleet, transmitters activated. An invisible wave of sound pitched at a frequency humans couldn't hear but Vraxians could, washed over the enemy fleet. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Vraxian ships began to drift. Their perfect formations broke apart. Ships that had been firing stopped. Some collided with each other. The effect lasted only 4 minutes, but 4 minutes was an eternity in combat. Human forces struck like a hammer. Railguns fired at helpless targets. Missiles hit ships that couldn't dodge. In 4 minutes, the humans destroyed 800 Vraxian vessels and damaged 1,000 more. When the Vraxians recovered, their formation was shattered. Their confidence was broken. They had never faced a weapon like this. How could primitives create something that bypassed all their defenses? Empress Velshara stared at her displays in disbelief. 800 ships gone in minutes. What was that? What did they do? Her science officer worked frantically. Some kind of sonic weapon, Empress. It targets our neural system specifically. They must have studied our biology and found a weakness. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The captured humans. The scientist, Hana. She had been studying their guards, learning about Vraxian biology. They had used their imprisonment to find a weakness and turn it into a weapon. The battle raged for 6 days. The Vraxians still had numbers, but their advantage was shrinking. Every time the humans activated their neural disruptors, more ships fell. The Vraxians tried to counter it. But sound in space was carried through their own ship's atmospheres, their own communication systems. There was no defense except to shut down everything, and a ship without power was a dead ship. On the sixth day, Admiral Yuna G's ship, the Indomitable, was hit. The damage was catastrophic. Life support failing. Engines gone. She had minutes before the ship broke apart. She looked at her crew. Abandon ship. Get to the escape pods. What about you, Admiral? Her tactical officer asked. Yuna smiled. Someone needs to make sure this ship hits something important on the way out. Go. That's an order. As her crew evacuated, Yuna set course for the Vraxian flagship. The Eternal Dominion, where Empress Velshara commanded her fleet. The Indomitable couldn't fire anymore, but it could still move. And a battleship moving at full speed was a weapon all by itself. The Vraxians saw her coming. They fired everything they had. But the Indomitable kept coming, a burning meteor heading straight for their flagship. At the last moment, Empress Velshara's ship veered away. The Indomitable missed but crashed into 3 other capital ships, destroying all of them in a massive explosion. The tide had turned. The Vraxian fleet was losing. They had started with 15,000 ships. Now they had 8,000, and many of those were damaged. The humans had less than 1,000 ships left, but they were fighting with a desperation that wouldn't quit. Then Fleet Admiral Dai Chang did something unexpected. He broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. His face appeared on every screen, every display, every communication system that could receive it. People of the galaxy, this is Fleet Admiral Dai Chang of the Human Systems Alliance. We have fought the Vraxian Empire for 8 days. We have lost billions of our people. We have sacrificed worlds and ships and lives. We did not want this war. We offered peace. We offered friendship. We were answered with chains and mockery. But we have proven something. We have proven we can fight. We have proven we can win. We have bloodied the greatest empire in the galaxy and made them pay for every human life they took. But we take no joy in killing. We take no pleasure in this destruction. Enough. This war ends now, not with the Vraxian Empire's destruction, but with recognition. Humanity will not be ignored. We will not be enslaved. We will not be mocked. We offer one final chance. Peace with dignity or war without mercy. Choose. The message hung in the void. The galaxy watched, waiting. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, Empress Velshara faced the hardest choice of her life. Her empire had lost 40% of its fleet. Earth still stood. The humans had weapons she didn't understand, tactics she couldn't counter, and a will that wouldn't break. If she continued, she might win, but the cost would be everything. Half her fleet, maybe more, and other species were watching. If the Vraxians were weakened enough, their rivals might attack. The empire could fall. She opened a communication channel. This is Empress Velshara. We accept your terms. Ceasefire effective immediately. The galaxy erupted in shock. The Vraxian Empire, which had never lost a war, had just accepted peace from a species they had mocked weeks ago. On Earth, people wept with relief. In bunkers and shelters, families held each other. On damaged ships, crews collapsed in exhaustion. The war was over. They had survived. 6 months later, Jin-Dae, Hana, and Yuna stood on Earth once more. They had been released as part of the peace accords. The galaxy was different now. Humanity sat on the Galactic Council as equals. No one mocked them anymore. No one dared. At a memorial service for the 4 billion humans who died in the war, Jin-Dae gave a speech. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the crowd and across the galaxy through broadcast. We did not start this war. We did not want this war. But when faced with a choice between freedom and submission, we chose to fight. Not because we love war, but because we love freedom more. This is our legacy. We are not warlike. We are not cruel. But we value our dignity, our rights, our very existence more than peace bought with chains. May we never forget the cost. May we never have to pay it again. But if that day comes, may we have the courage to stand as those who came before us stood, unbowed, unbroken, free. The old man who had stood before an empress and promised war had become a symbol across human space, not of aggression, but of the quiet strength that refuses to surrender no matter the odds. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity was young. Humanity was small. But humanity, when pushed to the edge, was absolutely terrifying. And now, The galaxy would treat them with the respect they had earned in blood and fire. The war was over. Humanity had survived, and the stars would never look at them the same way again.